Hello there everyone, welcome to Shadowman Stories. I am your storyteller and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Vincent Coldwater, and I've been a park ranger for 19 years. I've seen things in the wilderness that would make most people pack up and move to the city. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened at Logan Pass in December of 1973. I was 44 then, working the Gointoothson Road sector of Glacier National Park. Most folks think being a ranger is all about pointing tourists toward the gift shop and telling them not to feed the bears. But in winter, especially in a place like this, it's different. It's about life and death. The snow was already 20 feet deep when my radio crackled to life that morning. Static filled the air. Then a voice broke through, panicked, desperate. "This is Research Station Alpha. We need immediate help. Avalanche hit us hard. 3 men trapped, maybe more. Please, anyone out there?" The transmission cut off. I grabbed my gear and checked the weather. The wind was howling at 60 miles per hour, and the temperature was dropping fast. Already -30, and it was getting worse. In conditions like these, you don't go out alone. It's the first rule of mountain rescue. But those men didn't have time for me to wait for backup. I'd been doing avalanche rescue for most of my career. Lost my wife Sarah in a climbing accident 10 years back, and after that, I threw myself into saving other people. Maybe I thought it would somehow balance things out. Maybe I just needed to stay busy. The local Blackfoot people had stories about these mountains, old stories about ice demons and frozen giants that guarded the glaciers. I'd heard them plenty of times from the tribal elders who sometimes visited the park. Kasaka they called them, the frozen guardians. I always figured they were just trying to keep people away from dangerous areas, or maybe explaining away the hallucinations that hypothermia can cause. I should have listened. The snowmobile barely made it through the drifts. The wind was so strong it nearly knocked me over twice. My radio was crackling with static, and I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. The research station was 60 miles from the nearest town, up in the high country where the glaciers met the sky. When I finally reached the area, everything was wrong. The snow wasn't just deep, it was arranged in patterns that made no sense. Perfect circles and straight lines, like someone had drawn in the snow with a giant finger. Avalanches don't work that way. They're messy, chaotic. This looked planned. I started digging toward where the research station should have been. The snow was so hard it was almost like ice, but there were pockets of soft powder mixed in. Strange, as I dug deeper, I found the first sign of the team. It was their emergency shelter, collapsed but still visible. I cut through the fabric and crawled inside. The walls were covered in frost, but not the kind you usually see. These frost patterns looked like symbols, ancient symbols that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. The shelter was empty, but their equipment was scattered around in perfect geometric patterns. Circles within circles, all of it frozen, solid. Their radio was still on, still transmitting, but all that came through was whispering in a language I didn't recognize. Later I learned it was Blackfoot. That's when I found the first body. He was maybe 30 years old, wearing the kind of heavy winter gear that should have kept him warm in any weather, but he was frozen solid, trapped inside a block of ice that was so clear I could see every detail of his face. His eyes were wide open, staring at something above him. His mouth was open too, like he was screaming, but no sound could come out. The strangest part was that the ice block was perfect, completely smooth on all sides, like it had been carved by a master sculptor. I'd never seen anything like it, and I'd been in the mountains long enough to know what natural ice formations looked like. I checked my thermometer, -50 degrees. That was impossible. The weather report had said -30, and that was already dangerous. But my thermometer didn't lie, and I could feel the cold seeping through my heaviest winter gear. I radioed for backup, but all I got was static. The cold was affecting my equipment, but something else was wrong too. My breath was forming ice crystals that hung in the air instead of falling to the ground. That doesn't happen, not even in the worst cold I'd ever experienced. I followed the trail of scattered equipment deeper into the area. The footprints in the snow were huge, maybe 2 feet long and 8 inches deep. They were pressed into ice so hard that my boots barely made a mark next to them. Whatever made these prints was heavy and walking on frozen ground that should have been soft snow. The prints led toward a part of the glacier I'd never seen before. There was a blue light coming from somewhere ahead, soft and steady like a lantern. But it was the wrong color, blue too bright, too pure. It looked like the light was coming from inside the ice itself. I found the second team member about 100 yards from the first. He was still alive, but just barely. His name was Dr. Marcus Webb, and he was trying to talk through lips that were already turning blue from the cold. The tall one, he whispered, "It breathes ice. It's been watching us for days." I tried to get him to my snowmobile, but he was freezing from the inside out. I could see ice forming under his skin, spreading up his arms like some kind of infection. He died before I could get him to safety, his last words lost in the wind. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. Something was moving in the blue light ahead of me, something big. I could hear footsteps, but they were too slow, too heavy to be human. Each step sounded like a tree falling, muffled by the snow but deep enough to feel in my chest. I found the third team member's journal half buried in the snow. Dr. Patricia Chen had been the team leader, and her handwriting was clear and careful, even as she described impossible things. Day 3. The creature is at least 15 feet tall. It moves through the ice like it's walking through air. When it breathes, the air around it turns to ice crystals. The temperature drops 20 degrees whenever it comes close. Day 5. It's not just hunting us, it's playing with us. It could have killed us all by now, but it's taking its time. It wants us to be afraid. Day 7. I understand now. It's not just a creature, it's a guardian. We're digging in sacred ground, and it's protecting something. But understanding doesn't help us. We're all going to die here. The journal ended there, but I could see more footprints leading away from where I'd found it. The blue light was getting brighter, and I could hear something like singing in the wind, a low, mournful sound that made my teeth ache. I followed the trail, even though every instinct told me to turn around and run. Those men were counting on me. I'd never left anyone behind, and I wasn't about to start now. The trail led to a crack in the glacier that opened into a cave system. The blue light was coming from inside, steady and cold. As I got closer, I could see that the walls of the cave were covered in ice, but it wasn't natural ice. It was too smooth, too perfect, like someone had polished it. And there were shapes in the ice, human shapes. The cave was bigger than any ice cave I'd ever seen. The walls stretched up into darkness, and the blue light seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. But it was the bodies that made me stop cold. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all frozen in the walls like insects in amber. Some were wearing modern clothes, but others were dressed like they were from the 1800s. Fur coats, old-fashioned boots, clothes that looked like they came from a different century entirely. They were all perfectly preserved, and they were all staring at something in the center of the cave with expressions of pure terror. I found Dr. Patricia Chen about 20 feet into the cave. She was still alive, but barely. The ice was growing, on her skin like a living thing, spreading up her arms and legs. She could still move her head, and when she saw me, her eyes filled with relief and fear. "Don't let it see you," she whispered. "It feeds on warmth. It feeds on fear. Get out of here while you still can." I tried to break the ice around her, but it was harder than stone. My ice axe barely scratched it, and every time I hit it, the sound echoed through the cave like a bell. I was making too much noise, but I couldn't just leave her there. That's when I heard it. The sound was like breathing, but too slow and too deep to be human. Each breath lasted maybe 10 seconds, and with each exhale, the temperature in the cave dropped another few degrees. Ice started forming on my gear, and my flashlight began to dim. I heard footsteps coming from deeper in the cave. Slow, heavy steps that shook ice from the ceiling. Each footstep was followed by a scraping sound, like something being dragged across the floor. Dr. Chen's eyes went wide with terror. "It's coming," she whispered. "It knows you're here." I looked around for somewhere to hide, but the cave was too open. The only cover was behind some of the ice formations, but that would mean getting closer to the bodies in the walls. I didn't have a choice. I crept behind a pillar of ice and waited. The footsteps got closer, and the breathing got louder. The blue light began to pulse like a heartbeat, and I could feel something massive moving just out of sight. That's when I saw the fourth team member. Dr. James Harrison was crucified to the wall, with icicles driven through his hands and feet. He was still alive, but just barely. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. When he saw me, he managed to mouth one word: run. But I couldn't run. Not yet. I had to know what I was dealing with. The footsteps stopped. The breathing stopped. Even the wind outside seemed to go quiet. The only sound was the slow drip of melting ice, and even that seemed too loud. Then I heard my wife's voice. "Vincent," she said, clear as day. "Vincent, you need to leave this place now." I spun around, but there was nobody there. Sarah had been dead for 10 years, but I could hear her voice like she was standing right next to me. The sound was coming from the ice itself, like the walls were speaking. "Vincent, it's a trap. It's using us to call you. Don't listen to the voices." But I was listening. I couldn't help it. And that's when I realized the creature wasn't just hunting me. It was playing with me, just like it had played with the research team. The blue light suddenly flared brighter, and I could see everything in the cave at once. The bodies in the walls weren't just frozen, they were moving. Slowly, like they were trying to break free from the ice. Their eyes were following me, and their mouths were moving, all of them saying the same thing over and over. "Join us, join us, join us." I backed away from the pillar, but there was nowhere to go. The cave had only one entrance, and whatever was making those footsteps was between me and the exit. That's when I saw it. The creature was 15 feet tall, maybe more. It looked like a man, but wrong in every way that mattered. Its body was covered in ice that looked like armor, and its eyes burned with the same blue light that filled the cave. When it breathed, clouds of ice crystals poured from its mouth like smoke. But it was the intelligence in those eyes that scared me most. This wasn't just some animal. It was old, older than the mountains themselves, and it was angry. It moved toward Dr. Chen, who was still trapped in the ice. With one massive hand, it touched her forehead, and I watched as the ice spread across her face. She tried to scream, but the sound was cut off as the ice covered her mouth. In seconds, she was completely frozen, another statue in the creature's collection. The creature turned toward me then, and I could feel its attention like a physical weight. It was studying me, deciding what to do with me. When it spoke, its voice was like the grinding of glaciers. "You have entered the sacred place," it said in perfect English. "You have disturbed the resting place of the ancestors. Now you will join them." I raised my rifle, but the action was frozen solid. The creature laughed, a sound like breaking ice, and gestured with one hand. The rifle shattered like it was made of glass. "Your weapons cannot harm me," it said. "I am the guardian of this place. I have been here since the ice first covered the mountains. I will be here when the last human dies." The creature started walking toward me, and with each step, the temperature dropped. I could feel my body heat being pulled away, like the creature was sucking the warmth right out of me. My fingers were going numb, and my breath was coming in short, sharp gasps. "You are different from the others," it said. "You have seen death. You have felt loss. This makes you interesting." The creature stopped in front of me and reached out with one massive hand. Its fingers were like icicles, sharp and deadly. When it touched my face, I felt cold beyond anything I'd ever experienced. It was like being dunked in liquid nitrogen. "I can show you your wife," it said. "She is here, trapped in the ice like all the others. Would you like to join her?" For a moment, I wanted to say yes. The cold was so intense that it was almost peaceful. I could feel my body shutting down, my heart slowing, my thoughts becoming fuzzy. It would be so easy to just let go. But then, I remembered why I was here. The research team was counting on me. Even if I couldn't save them, I had to try to get word back to the outside world. People needed to know what was happening in these mountains. I reached for my emergency flare gun, the one piece of equipment that hadn't frozen solid. The creature saw what I was doing and laughed again. "Fire cannot harm me," it said. "I am made of ice and shadow." But I wasn't trying to hurt it. I was trying to blind it. I fired the flare directly at its face. The bright red light filled the cave, and the creature stumbled backward with a roar that shook ice from the ceiling. It covered its eyes with its hands, and I could see that the light was causing it real pain. The creature's eyes had adapted to the blue light of the ice cave. The sudden flare was like staring into the sun. I ran behind me. I could hear the creature recovering. Its roar of rage echoed through the cave, and I could hear the sound of ice cracking and breaking. It was bringing the whole cave system down, trying to trap me inside. I reached the entrance just as the ceiling began to collapse. Chunks of ice the size of cars were falling all around me, and I could hear the creature's footsteps getting closer. It was chasing me, and it was fast. I made it outside just as the cave mouth collapsed completely, but I could still hear the creature inside, and I knew it wasn't trapped. Something that could move through ice like it was air wouldn't be stopped by a cave-in. I ran for my snowmobile, but the creature burst through the ice wall like it was made of paper. It was more angry than I'd ever seen anything in my life, and it was coming straight for me. I got the snowmobile started just as the creature reached me. It swung one massive arm, and I felt the wind from its swing as I accelerated. Away, the creature chased me through the snow, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. It was controlling the weather around me. The wind picked up, and the snow began to fall so hard I could barely see. The creature was trying to trap me in a whiteout, but I knew these mountains better than anyone. I'd been riding these trails for 19 years. I made it back to the ranger station just as my body started to shut down from the cold. My hands were so numb I could barely turn the key, and my feet had no feeling in them at all. The doctors later told me I'd come within minutes of dying from hypothermia. The official report blamed the research team's death on a natural avalanche. The cave system was buried under tons of snow and ice, and there was no way to recover the bodies. The families were told their loved ones died quickly, which was a lie. But sometimes lies are kinder than the truth. I requested a transfer to a desert park the next month. I told my supervisor I was getting too old for mountain rescue, which was partly true, but the real reason was that I couldn't stand the cold anymore. Even in summer, I felt like I was freezing. The frostbite took 3 toes and 2 fingers. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the dreams. Every night, I could hear the creature's voice calling to me. It was still up there, still guarding its sacred place, still waiting. I've been working in Death Valley for 30 years now, and I've never gone back to Montana. But sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I can hear that sound again, the sound of the creature's breathing, slow and patient. The Blackfoot people were right about the Kesakamatapi. They were trying to warn us, but we were too smart to listen. We thought we knew better than the people who had lived in those mountains for thousands of years. I'm retiring next month. My wife, my second wife, wants to travel, maybe see the country. She's been asking about Montana, about the glaciers and the mountains. She says they must be beautiful in winter. I tell her we should go somewhere warm instead. Florida maybe, or Arizona. Some places are beautiful, but they're not meant for people like us. Some places have guardians, and those guardians don't like visitors. I learned that lesson the hard way. I just hope I never have to learn it again. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if the creature is still waiting for me. I wonder if it remembers my face, my voice, my smell. I wonder if it's patient enough to wait for me to come back. I guess I'll find out when I die. Maybe that's when it will come for me, when I'm too weak to run anymore. Until then, I'm staying as far away from the cold as I can get. My name is Vincent Coldwater, and I've seen things that would make you never want to go camping again. But don't let that stop you from enjoying the outdoors. Just remember what the old-timers used to say. Respect the mountains, respect the weather, and respect the stories the local people tell you. They might just save your life. My name is James Bloodmoon, and I've been a park ranger for 15 years. That's long enough to know the difference between a regular wolf and something that shouldn't exist. Long enough to know when ranchers are lying and when they're telling the truth about something they wish was a lie. It was August 1988 when I first heard about the killings in the Buffalo National River area. Hot, sticky weather that made everything smell like wet earth and rotting leaves. The kind of weather that brings out the worst in both animals and people. I was sitting in my ranger station, 45 miles from Harrison, when old Pete McCready came stumbling through my door. His hands were shaking, and he smelled like whiskey and fear. "They got my cattle again," he said, dropping into the chair. Across from my desk, 3 more head, just like the others. I'd been tracking these cattle killings for 2 weeks. 7 ranchers had lost livestock in the same area. All the kills were clean, professional. Too professional for regular wolves. "Same pattern?" I asked, pulling out my notebook. Pete nodded. "Throats cut clean through, blood drained dry. Not a drop left on the ground." That was the part that bothered me. Wolves don't drain blood. They eat meat, leave a mess. These kills were different. Too neat, too careful. "You see anything else?" Pete's face went pale. Tracks, but they ain't normal wolf tracks. I'd seen the tracks myself. They started on 4 legs, like a wolf. Then they changed, became 2 legs, like a man walking upright, then back to 4 legs again. The stride was wrong for any animal I knew. The boys are saying it's werewolves, Pete whispered, like in the old Cherokee stories. I laughed, but it didn't sound convincing. My grandmother had been Cherokee, and she'd told me those stories when I was little. Men who could turn into wolves, monsters that hunted in packs. I'd never believed them. There's no such thing as werewolves, Pete, just big wolves that learn to work together. But even as I said it, I was thinking about the blood. Where did all that blood go that night? I loaded my truck with camping gear and silver bullets. The silver was a joke gift from my army buddies, but I kept them anyway, just in case my grandmother's stories were more than stories. The Buffalo National River winds through some of the darkest forest in Arkansas. Thick trees that block out the sun. Limestone caves that go down forever. Places where a man could disappear and never be found. I set up camp near the last kill site. The air felt wrong somehow. Too quiet. Even the insects had stopped making noise. As the sun went down, I heard the first howl. It started low, almost like a man humming. Then it got higher, wilder. Other voices joined in. 7 different howls, all talking to each other in a language I didn't understand. I'd heard wolves before. These weren't wolves. The next morning, I found Sarah Jenkins. She was 17, worked at the diner in Harrison. Her car was on the side of the road, driver's door open, keys still in the ignition. She was 50 yards into the woods, hanging from a tree branch. But she wasn't just hanging, she was arranged, positioned, like someone had taken time to make it look right. Her clothes were torn, but not randomly. The tears formed patterns, symbols, and her blood had been used to paint marks on the trees around her. I called the sheriff, but I knew he wouldn't understand. This wasn't a regular murder, this was something else. While I waited for the sheriff, I followed the tracks. They led away from Sarah's body in a straight line, like whoever did this knew exactly where they were going. The tracks were fresh, still wet in the soft earth, and they were changing again. 4 legs to 2 legs to 4 legs. But the spacing was wrong. Too wide for a man, too narrow for a wolf. I found the ceremonial site 3 miles deeper in the forest. It was a circle of stones, each one as tall as a man. Cherokee work, probably hundreds of years old. But the blood on the stones was fresh, still wet. In the center of the circle, someone had built a fire. The ashes were still warm, and scattered around the fire were pieces of clothing. Sarah's clothing. But there was something else, something that made my skin crawl. Footprints, dozens of them, leading away from the circle in all directions. But they weren't human footprints, they were wolf prints, big ones, bigger than any wolf I'd ever seen. And they were perfectly spaced, like soldiers marching in formation. I followed one set of tracks. They led to a deep ravine where the trees grew so thick I had to use my flashlight in the middle of the day. The air smelled like wet fur and something else. Something rotten. That's when I saw the first one. It was standing in the shadows about 30 yards away. At first, I thought it was a man. It was standing on 2 legs, about 7 feet tall, but its arms were too long. Its fingers ended in claws, and its face was wrong. Too long, too narrow, like someone had stretched a wolf's head to fit on a human body. We stared at each other for what felt like hours. Then it smiled. Not a wolf smile, a human smile. Full of teeth that were too sharp. It spoke in a voice like grinding stones. "You're not supposed to be here, James Blacknoon." It knew my name. Before I could react, it dropped to all 4s and ran, but it didn't run like a wolf. It ran like water flowing downhill. Smooth, fast, silent. I stood there, shaking, trying to convince myself I hadn't seen what I'd seen. But I could still smell it. Wet fur and rotting meat. And something else. Something that smelled like fear. My fear. Over the next 3 days, 4 more people disappeared. Tommy Garrett, 16, never came home from fishing. His rod and tackle box were found by the river, but no sign of Tommy. Maria Santos, 32, vanished while walking her dog. We found the dog 3 miles away, skinned and hanging from a tree. Just like Sarah, it was arranged, positioned. The Walker twins, Billy and Bobby, age 12. Their bicycles were found on the trail to the old homestead. The bikes were placed side by side, kickstands down, like someone had parked them carefully. Each disappearance happened at night. Each one left tracks that changed from human to wolf. And each one happened closer to the ceremonial site. I wasn't sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing in the forest. The way it smiled. The way it knew my name. On the fourth night, I heard children crying. The sound was coming from the old homestead, a place that had been abandoned for 20 years. I grabbed my rifle and followed the sound. The homestead sat in a valley surrounded by limestone cliffs. The house was falling apart, but the root cellar was still intact. The crying was coming from down there. I climbed down the wooden steps, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The smell hit me first, wet fur and rotting meat, and something else, something that smelled like children. The root cellar was bigger than I expected. It stretched back into the hillside, with rooms carved out of the limestone, and in those rooms, I found them. The Walker twins, Tommy Garrett, Maria Santos, and Steve, 3 other children I didn't recognize. They were alive, but they were changing. Their eyes reflected my flashlight like an animal's eyes. Their teeth were getting sharper. Their fingernails were growing into claws. "Help us," Billy Walker whispered. His voice was getting deeper, more like a growl. "We can't stop it," Bobby said. "It's in our blood now." They were turning into those things, all of them. "How long?" I asked. 3 days, Tommy said. "It takes 3 days. Then we'll be like them." "Like who?" "The pack," Maria whispered. "The Brotherhood. They've been here forever, taking people, making more of themselves." I heard footsteps on the cellar stairs. Slow, careful, like someone trying not to make noise. "They're back," Billy said. "Hide." I turned off my flashlight and pressed myself against the wall. The footsteps got closer. Then I heard breathing. 7 different patterns of breathing. They were all around me. A voice spoke in the darkness. The same grinding stone voice I'd heard before. "We know you're here, James. We can smell your fear." My flashlight flickered on by itself. 7 of them stood in the cellar, surrounding me, each one about 7 feet tall, standing on 2 legs. Their faces were wrong. Too long, too narrow. Wolf faces on human bodies. "You've seen too much," the leader said. "Now you have to choose." "Choose what?" "Join us," it said, "or die. Those are your only options." I looked at the children. They were watching me with eyes that glowed in the dark, already becoming something else, something that hunted in packs. "What happened to Sarah?" I asked. "She chose to die," the leader said. "We honored her choice, and if I join you, you'll live forever. You'll be strong. You'll never be afraid again." The leader stepped closer. I could see its teeth, long and sharp and stained with blood. "We've been watching you, James. You're like us already. A hunter, a killer. You just need to accept what you are." It was right. I'd killed before, in the army, in the line of duty. But this was different. "I need time to think," I said. The leader smiled. "You have until tomorrow night. Then we'll decide for you." They left as quietly as they'd come, but I could still smell them, still feel their eyes watching me. The next day, I did 3 things. First, I called in sick to work. Second, I drove to the Cherokee reservation and talked to my grandmother's sister, who was still alive at 93. Third, I went to the church in Harrison and had the priest bless my silver bullets. My great-aunt listened to my story, without interrupting when I finished. She nodded. "The Brotherhood," she said. "We thought they were gone. You know about them. My grandmother knew about them. They're not werewolves. They're something older, something that was here before the Cherokee, before anyone." She gave me a leather pouch filled with herbs and small bones. "This won't kill them," she said, "but it might protect you long enough to get away." "What if I don't want to get away?" She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. "Then you'll die, but maybe that's better than becoming one of them." That night, I went back to the homestead. The children were still in the root cellar, but they were different, more animal than human. Their eyes glowed brighter, their teeth were longer. "It's almost time," Billy said. His voice was completely different now, deeper, rougher. "Where are they?" I asked. "Coming," Maria said. "They're always coming. I heard them before I saw them." 7 sets of footsteps moving through the forest. They weren't trying to be quiet anymore. They knew I was trapped. They came down the cellar stairs like water flowing. Smooth, fast, silent. "Have you decided?" the leader asked. "Yes," I said. "I choose to fight." I pulled out my rifle and fired. The blessed silver bullet hit the leader in the chest. He screamed and fell backward. Black blood poured from the wound. The others attacked. They moved faster than anything I'd ever seen. Faster than wolves, faster than men. But they were angry now, not thinking clearly. I used my military training. Stay mobile, pick your shots. Don't let them surround you. I killed 2 more before they realized what was happening. The silver bullets tore through them like paper. They died screaming, their bodies changing back to human form as they fell. The remaining 4 were smarter. They spread out, tried to flank me. But I had the narrow cellar stairs at my back. They could only come at me one at a time. The 4th, one almost got me. Its claws raked across my chest, tearing through my shirt and skin. But I managed to get the rifle around and put a bullet in its head. 3 left. That's when I realized the children were gone. During the fight, they'd escaped. Either that, or they'd become something else entirely. The last 3 Brotherhood members looked at their dead packmates. Then they looked at me. This isn't over, the leader said. The silver bullet hadn't killed him, but it had hurt him badly. Black blood still leaked from his chest. We'll find you, another one said. We'll always find you. They ran, but they didn't run like wolves. They ran like men who were afraid. I stood in the cellar, surrounded by bodies that looked human again. Young men, probably taken years ago, maybe decades. The children were gone. I never saw them again. But sometimes, late at night, I hear howling in the distance. 7 voices calling to each other. The Brotherhood, still hunting, still looking for new members. I left Arkansas that week, transferred to a park in Florida, where the biggest predator is an alligator. I told my supervisor I needed a change of scenery. I didn't tell him about the silver bullets I still carry, or the Cherokee protection pouch I wear around my neck. I filed a report about the incident, called it a rabid wolf pack that had been eliminated. The bodies in the cellar were listed as missing hikers found deceased. The children were never officially reported missing. Small town, poor families. No one asked too many questions. But I know the truth. The Brotherhood is still out there, still hunting, still taking people and turning them into something else. I can't sleep without lights on. I can't be around dogs or wolves. Even the sound of howling on TV makes me break out in a cold sweat. My grandmother's stories were real. All of them. The monsters exist. They walk among us. They look like us, and they're always looking for new members. Sometimes I wonder about those children. Billy and Bobby Walker, Tommy Garrett, Maria Santos. Did they escape? Are they still human? Or are they out there somewhere, running with the pack, hunting for their own victims? I don't know. And I don't want to know. But I keep the silver bullets loaded, just in case. Because the Brotherhood is still out there. Still howling. Still hunting. And they know my name. My name is Catherine Grimwald, and I've been a forest ranger for 13 years. I've seen plenty of scary things in the woods, but nothing like what happened in October 1981. Some people say I'm crazy now. Maybe I am, but I know what I saw in those caves. It was late October when my radio crackled to life. Cold morning, first freeze of the season. I was drinking coffee in my cabin when dispatch called. Catherine, we got a problem. 4 spelunkers went missing 3 days ago. Last signal came from the cave system near Devil's Rock. I knew those caves, mapped most of them myself, over the years. The limestone formations up there are tricky. Lots of underwater passages and dead ends. People get lost easy. Any idea which cave they went into? I asked. Negative. Local Ojibwe folks are saying something about hungry spirits, but you know how that goes. I did know. The old-timers around here always had stories about Wendigos and cannibals. Fur traders going missing back in the 1600s. Kids told ghost stories about the caves, but in 13 years, I'd never seen anything I couldn't explain. I'll head up there, I said. Send backup if you don't hear from me by nightfall. Copy that. Be careful, Catherine. The drive to Devil's Rock took 2 hours on logging roads. October in Minnesota means the trees are dying, all red and gold before they give up for winter. Beautiful and sad at the same time. The air smelled like dead leaves and coming snow. I parked my truck where the road ended and hiked the last mile. My gear felt heavy: ropes, lights, first aid kit, emergency beacon, everything I'd need for a cave rescue. I'd done this dozens of times before. The cave entrance sat in a cliff face, about 40 feet up from the valley floor. You had to climb to get there, which is why most people never found it. The missing spelunkers were experienced though. They'd know how to get up there safely. What I found at the entrance made my skin crawl. Their base camp was set up in a circle, not just randomly placed a perfect circle. Their backpacks, sleeping bags, even their water bottles, all arranged like they were having some kind of ceremony. In the middle sat a pile of bones. At first I thought they were animal bones, maybe deer or elk, but when I looked closer, I saw finger bones, human finger bones, and they'd been gnawed on. Teeth marks all over them, like someone had been chewing on them like chicken wings. "Hello," I called into the cave. "Anyone in there?" My voice echoed back, but nothing else. Just silence, and that sweet rotten smell drifting out from the darkness. I checked my equipment one more time. Headlamp, backup, flashlight, rope, radio. The radio crackled with static when I tried to call dispatch. These caves always messed with signals. I should have waited for backup. That's what protocols said. But those people might still be alive down there, and every hour mattered in a cave. Rescue. I stepped into the darkness. The cave mouth opened into a tunnel about 6 feet wide. My headlamp beam cut through the black, showing limestone walls that dripped with moisture. The air was thick and hard to breathe, like being inside a tomb. 50 feet in, I found the first helmet. It was cracked right down the middle, with bite marks on the inside. Human bite marks. The plastic was chewed up like someone had been eating it. The chin strap was torn, not cut, torn by teeth. I picked it up with shaking hands. The name Mike was written on the side in black marker. One of the missing spelunkers. "Mike," I called. "Can you hear me?" Nothing but my own voice bouncing back. The tunnel split into 3 passages. I had to choose which way to go. The left passage had scratch marks on the walls, deep gouges in the limestone, like claws had raked across it, but the scratches were 12 feet high. No animal I knew could reach that high. I chose the middle passage. It sloped downward, getting narrower as it went. The smell got stronger too, sweet and rotten like meat, left out in the sun. I had to breathe through my mouth to keep from gagging. 20 minutes deeper, I found the rope. It should have been their climbing rope, thick and strong, but it was cut into pieces, each piece about 3 feet long. The ends weren't clean cuts though, they were chewed through. I could see the tooth marks in the fibers. My radio crackled. "Catherine, you there?" I grabbed it fast. "Yeah, I'm here. Find anything. Evidence of the missing team. Heading deeper. Copy. Be careful." The tunnel opened into a chamber the size of a school gym. My light played across the walls, and I saw more scratch marks. But these weren't random. They formed patterns, like someone had been drawing on the walls with their claws. In the center of the chamber sat a pile of skulls. I counted 23 of them, maybe more. Some looked old, really old. Others were fresher. One still had hair stuck to it. They were arranged in a circle, like the equipment at the cave entrance. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my flashlight. 13 years as a ranger, and I'd never seen anything like this. Then I heard the chanting. It was faint, coming from somewhere deeper in the cave system. Low voices, singing in a language I didn't recognize, but it sounded human. Maybe the missing spelunkers were still alive. I followed the sound through another tunnel. This one so narrow I had to duck. The chanting got louder as I went deeper. It echoed off the walls, making it hard to tell where it was coming from. The tunnel opened into another chamber, bigger than the first, and hanging from the ceiling was a body. It was suspended by ropes around its wrists, about 10 feet off the ground. The person was still alive. I could see their chest moving up and down, but their legs were gone from the knees down. Just bone and torn flesh. "Help me," they whispered when they saw my light. "Please help me." I ran toward them, but stopped when I saw the name on their helmet. Sarah, another one of the missing spelunkers. "Sarah, I'm a ranger. I'm here to help. Can you tell me what happened?" Her eyes were wide with terror. "The tall, hungry one," she whispered. "It's still here. It's watching us." "What tall, hungry one? Where are the others?" "Dead. All dead. Except ... She looked around wildly. "Except the one it's saving for last." "I'm going to get you down," I said, pulling out my knife. "No," Sarah screamed. "Don't cut the ropes. That's how it knows where we are." But it was too late. The second I touched the rope, the chanting stopped, and something moved in the shadows. Sarah died while I was cutting her down, just stopped breathing, like something had sucked the life right out of her. Her last words were, "It's coming." I lowered her body to the ground and said a quick prayer. Then I heard footsteps echoing from the tunnel behind me. Slow, deliberate footsteps, too heavy to be human. I turned off my headlamp and pressed myself against the cave wall. In the total darkness, I could hear my own heart pounding. The footsteps got closer, then stopped right at the entrance to the chamber. Something was breathing in the darkness. Long, slow breaths that sounded wrong, like air whistling through broken teeth. I waited 5 minutes before turning my light. Back on the entrance was empty, but I could smell that sweet rotten stench, stronger than ever. Following the cave system deeper, I found more evidence of the missing team. A backpack torn open, its contents scattered, a water bottle crushed flat, and in one tunnel I found writing scratched into the wall. "It eats while you're still alive, Mike." The handwriting was shaky, desperate. Below it, in different handwriting, "Sounds like people UK, NOW, Dave," and at the bottom, in letters so faint, I almost missed them, "Help us, Jenny," for names. 4 people, and I'd already found 2 of them. The tunnel led to a chamber that made my stomach turn. The walls were covered in bones, arm bones, leg bones, ribs, all of them gnawed clean. And they weren't just from the missing spelunkers. Some of these bones were old, really old. I saw metal buttons from old-style clothes mixed in with the bones. These people had been dead for decades, maybe centuries. In the center of the chamber was a feeding pit. It was about 8 feet across and 5 feet deep, carved right into the stone floor. At the bottom lay Mike, one of the missing spelunkers. He was still alive, but barely. His legs were gone, eaten down to the bone. His arms too, but his eyes were still open, still aware. "Kill me," he whispered when he saw me. "Please." I climbed down into the pit, trying not to look at what was left of him. "I'm going to get you out of here." "No, you don't understand. It keeps us alive on purpose. Eats us slow, over days. Makes the meat last longer." I felt sick. Who's doing this? What is it? Not what. Who? It used to be a person, long time ago. But it's been eating people for so long. It's not human anymore. It's tall, maybe 18 feet, has a deer skull for a head, and it can sound like anyone. As if on cue, I heard Sarah's voice calling from the tunnel. "Catherine, Catherine, I'm alive." I got away, but I'd just seen Sarah die. Her body was 2 chambers back. "It's trying to trick you," Mike whispered. "It does that. Sounds like people you know. Sounds like people you love." The voice came again, closer now. "Catherine, please help me. I'm hurt." I pulled out my gun and pointed it at the tunnel entrance. "I know you're not Sarah." The voice changed. Now it sounded like my dad, who died 5 years ago. Kathy, is that you, honey?" My hands started shaking. I hadn't heard my dad's voice in years, but this sounded exactly like him. "Come here, sweetheart. Daddy's here." "It's not real," Mike whispered. "Don't listen." But part of me wanted to listen. Part of me wanted to believe. My dad was somehow still alive. The voice kept calling, moving. Around the chamber, sometimes it sounded like Sarah, sometimes like my dad. Once it sounded like my sister, who lived in California. It knew their voices perfectly. Then I heard movement in the tunnel. Something big was coming. "It's here," Mike whispered. "God help us both." The thing that entered the chamber wasn't human. It was tall, just like Mike said, probably 18 feet. Its body was thin and stretched, like someone had pulled a person through a taffy machine. Its skin was pale gray, almost white, and its head was a deer skull, with antlers that scraped the ceiling. It moved wrong too, not like a person walking, but like water flowing. It seemed to glide across the stone floor without making a sound. When it spoke, it used my dad's voice again. "Hello, Kathy, I've been waiting for you." I shot it. The bullet hit its center mass, but it just kept coming. No blood, no reaction, like shooting a shadow. It reached down into the pit with arms that were too long, too thin. Its fingers ended in claws that looked like broken glass. "The old ways are best," it said in Sarah's voice. "Eating slow, making it last." It grabbed Mike and lifted him up like he weighed nothing. Mike screamed once, then went quiet. The thing bit down on his neck, and I watched the life drain out of Mike's eyes. That's when I ran. I ran through the caves like a crazy person, my headlamp beam bouncing off walls and ceiling. Behind me, I could hear the thing moving. It didn't run. It flowed through the tunnels like smoke, and it kept talking. "Catherine," it said in my mother's voice. "Don't run from me, sweetie." "Catherine," it said in my sister's voice. "I'm scared. Please, help me. Catherine, it said in my own voice. You can't escape. You belong to me now. Hearing my own voice coming from that thing made me sick to my stomach. I reached the chamber with the skull circle and kept running. The scratch marks on the walls seemed to glow in my light, and I realized they weren't random at all. They were a story, told in pictures. People being hunted, people being eaten. The same story, over and over, for hundreds of years. The thing was getting closer. I could feel it behind me, cold and hungry. I reached the narrow tunnel that led back to the entrance. But when I got there, the opening was blocked. Rocks had fallen from the ceiling, sealing the way out. Or maybe the thing had moved them. Either way, I was trapped. My radio crackled. Catherine, come in, Catherine. I grabbed it. I'm here. I'm trapped in the cave system near Devil's Rock. Send help. Copy that. Help is on the way. But then, I heard my own voice on the radio, calling from behind me. Never mind, dispatch. False alarm. Everything's fine here. The thing had learned to use my voice on the radio. It was calling off my rescue. I turned around, and there it was. 18 feet tall, deer skull head, those two long arms reaching for me. Up close, I could see that its mouth was full of human teeth. Hundreds of them, all different sizes, like it had collected them from its victims. You've been running your whole life, it said in my dad's voice. Time to rest. What are you? I asked. I am hunger, it said. I am the winter that never ends. I am the reason people learned to fear the dark. You're a Wendigo. Names are for things that die. I am beyond death. I have been feeding in these caves since the ice melted. French fur traders, Ojibwe hunters, lost children, spelunkers like your friends. They all taste the same in the end. It reached for me with those glass claw fingers. I dodged and ran toward the feeding pit chamber, but it was faster than me. It appeared in front of me, blocking the way. You cannot escape, it said. But I will make your death slow, sweet. The fear makes the meat tender. I remembered something my grandfather told me when I was little. He was part Ojibwe, and he taught me words in the old language. Protection prayers. I started speaking them now, the words coming back to me after all these years. The effect was immediate. The thing stumbled backward, its deer skull head shaking. From side to side, the antlers scraped against the ceiling, sending down a shower of rock dust. Old words, it hissed. Old power, but not enough. It was right. The prayer slowed it down, but it didn't stop it. It kept coming, and I kept backing away. That's when I remembered the emergency explosives in my pack. Every cave rescue team carries them, in case we need to blast through a rockfall. I had 3 charges, enough to bring down a small section of tunnel. I pulled out the first charge and armed it. Stay back. The thing laughed with Mike's voice. You would bring down the cave. He would kill us both, if that's what it takes. You are braver than most. That will make eating you even sweeter. I threw the charge down the tunnel and dove for cover. The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space. Rocks rained down, and dust filled the air so thick I couldn't see. When the dust settled, part of the tunnel had collapsed. But the thing was still there, on the other side of the rockfall, and it was angry. You think stone can stop me? It roared. It put its hands on the rocks, and they started to dissolve. Not breaking apart, dissolving, like ice in hot water. The thing could move through solid rock like it was air. I armed my second charge and threw it at the thing's feet. The explosion sent it flying backward, but it landed on its feet like a cat. No damage at all. Last chance, it said, flowing toward me again. Come quietly, and I will kill you fast. I armed my third and final charge, but instead of throwing it, I held it tight against my chest. You want to eat me, I said. Come and get me. The thing's deer skull head tilted to one side. You would die to deny me my meal. I'd die to send you to hell. For the first time, it looked uncertain, maybe even afraid. You cannot kill me, it said. I am eternal. I am hunger itself. Maybe, but I can hurt you, and maybe that's enough. The thing started backing away. You are insane. 13 years in these woods will do that to you. I started walking toward it, the armed explosive still pressed against my chest. If I let go of the dead man's switch, we'd both be buried under 1,000,000 tons of rock. The thing kept backing up. Stop, you do not understand. If you kill me, others will come. My kind reproduces through death. Kill me, and you become me. Then, I guess we're both screwed. I took another step forward. The thing hit the cave wall and couldn't back up anymore. Please, it said. and for the first time it used its own voice. Not my dad's, not Sarah's, but its own. It sounded like wind blowing through a graveyard. I do not want to die. Should have thought of that before you started eating people. I was close enough to touch it now. The thing's deer skull head was level with my chest, and I could see into its empty eye sockets. There was something in there, a faint red glow, like the last embers of a dying fire. I was a person once, it whispered, a long time ago. I was lost in the winter, and I was so hungry, so very hungry. I ate my friends to survive, and when spring came, I couldn't stop eating. The hunger was all I had left. I'm sorry, I said, but this ends now. I let go of the dead man's switch. The explosion brought down half the cave system. I should have died, but there was an underground river that ran through the deepest caves. The blast knocked me into the water, and the current carried me out, through a crack in the rock face about 2 miles downstream. I woke up on the riverbank with hypothermia and a broken arm. A fisherman found me and called for help. I spent 3 days in the hospital, answering questions I couldn't really answer. The official report said the cave system collapsed due to geological instability. The bodies of the 4 missing spelunkers were never recovered. Neither was the body of the thing that killed them. I quit the Forest Service 6 months later. Couldn't handle being in the woods anymore. Couldn't handle enclosed spaces either. I moved to Minneapolis and became a fire inspector. Spent my days checking exit routes and fire doors, making sure people had ways to escape. But I never really escaped. I still hear its voice sometimes, especially at night. It whispers my name, calls to me in the voices of people I love. My therapist says it's PTSD, that my brain is trying to process the trauma. Maybe she's right, or maybe the thing was right too. Maybe you can't kill something like that. Maybe it's still down there, waiting in the dark, getting hungry again. I've been thinking about going back, not to the collapsed cave that's sealed forever, but there are other caves in the Superior National Forest, hundreds of them, and sometimes, on quiet nights, I hear stories. Hikers going missing, campers finding circles of bones, rangers reporting strange voices in the darkness. My grandfather's protection prayers are still with me, and I've learned others, older ones, stronger ones. If the thing survived somehow, if it's still out there, I might be the only one who can stop it. But part of me wonders if I'm just looking for an excuse to go back. If maybe, after all these years, I'm getting hungry too. The thing said its kind reproduces through death. That killing it would make me become it. I didn't believe that at that time, but now I'm not so sure. Last week, I caught myself looking at my neighbor's dog and wondering what it would taste like. Maybe I should go back to the caves after all. Maybe it's time to finish what I started. Maybe it's time to feed. My name is Robert Dustwind, and I've been a ranger for 21 years. That's long enough to see every kind of trouble the desert can throw at you. Heat stroke, snake bites, flash floods, lost hikers, you name it, I've handled it. But I never believed in ghost stories. Not until that summer day in 1964, when everything I thought I knew about the desert changed forever. The call came in around noon on July 15th. A family from Los Angeles had been reported missing. The Hartmans. Their car was found abandoned in the Devil's Playground Salt Flats, about 90 miles from Barstow. Engine still running, air conditioning, blasting, but no sign of the family anywhere. Don't go out there alone, Bob, my supervisor warned over the radio. It's 135 degrees on those flats today. Take backup. But I was stubborn. 21 years of rescuing people from the desert had made me cocky. I'd served as a Navy medic in the Pacific, survived things that would break most men. A little heat didn't scare me. The drive to Devil's Playground took 2 hours. The name fits. It's a wasteland of white salt stretching as far as you can see. The Kemahuvi people who lived here first called it the home of the Weeping Salt Woman. They had stories about travelers who went missing, found years later turned to salt statues. But I put that down to desert sun and too much imagination. When I reached the Hartman car, my first thought was how wrong everything looked. The blue sedan sat in the middle of the salt flat, like a toy someone had dropped. The engine was indeed running, gas gauge showing nearly empty. But what made my skin crawl was how the family's belongings were arranged around the car in a perfect spiral pattern. Suitcases, clothes, children's toys, all laid out in a careful circle. The spiral started with small items near the car and got bigger as it went out. At the very edge, maybe 50 feet away, I found a melted action figure. The plastic had somehow fused with the salt, creating this twisted sculpture that looked almost alive. I walked the entire circle twice. The salt was soft here, like sand. Should have been footprints everywhere, but there were none. Not a single track leading away from the car. Just smooth white salt stretching to the horizon. That's when I heard a sound coming from the car radio. Static, but not normal static. It sounded like crying, like someone very far away was weeping. I turned off the engine and the sound stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. In the desert, you always hear something: wind, insects, your own breathing. But this was complete silence, like the world had stopped. I radioed headquarters, found the Hartman vehicle. Beginning, search pattern, copy that. Bob, any sign of the family? I was about to say no when I saw something that made me stop cold. About 100 yards away, sitting on the salt like he was waiting for a bus, was a man. He was perfectly still, facing away from me toward a distant ridge. I think I found the father, I said into the radio, moving to investigate. The walk across the salt felt like walking through an oven. Heat rose off the ground in waves, so thick I could barely see. But as I got closer to the man, I realized something was very wrong. He was too still, too perfect, like a statue. When I reached him, I understood why. Harold Hartman was dead, but not from the heat. His body was mummified, dried like ancient leather. But here's the thing that made no sense. He showed no signs of dying from thirst. His lips weren't cracked. His tongue wasn't swollen. He just looked ... old, like he'd aged 50 years in a few days. He was positioned facing northeast, toward a low ridge I knew was an old Kemahuvi burial ground. His hands were folded in, his lap, eyes closed peacefully. Around his body, the salt had formed strange patterns, lines and curves that almost looked like writing. I pulled out my compass to mark the direction he was facing. The needle swung wildly, then settled, pointing directly at Harold's body. I moved 10 feet away and checked again, still pointing at him. 20 feet, same thing. Something was very wrong here. I called for backup and started a wider search. The heat was getting to me faster than it should have. My water tasted strange, metallic, like it was mixed with salt. I'd brought 2 full canteens, but somehow they were already half empty. Following the spiral pattern outward, I found more evidence of the family. A woman's purse, a teenager's backpack, a little girl's stuffed rabbit, all arranged in that same careful pattern, like someone had been playing a game. Then I found Margaret Hartman. She was sitting inside what looked like a crystal cave, except the cave was made of salt. The white formations had grown around her in perfect geometric shapes, creating a glittering tomb. She was alive when I found her, but barely. Her skin had a strange translucent quality, like she was slowly turning into salt herself. "The lady," she whispered when she saw me. "She's been crying so long. She wants the children to stay with her." "Where are your kids?" "Margaret, where are Tommy and Sarah?" Her eyes rolled back, showing only white. "She takes the children first. They don't understand why Mama has to leave them. But Mama always leaves. Always." Margaret's body was aging before my eyes. Her hair turned grey, then white. Her skin developed wrinkles that deepened as I watched. She was dying of old age in fast motion. "Who's doing this?" I asked. "Who's the lady?" But Margaret was gone. In the space of 10 minutes, she'd aged from a 40-year-old woman to an ancient corpse. The salt formations around her grew taller, encasing her completely. I ran from that place. Professional training said to stay, to document everything, to be methodical. But every instinct screamed at me to get away. The sun was getting lower, and shadows were growing longer. In the desert, you don't want to be caught out after dark. I found Tommy Hartman as the sun touched the horizon. The 15-year-old was sitting on a salt mound, partially crystallized but still breathing. His legs had turned to white stone, but his upper body was still human. "It doesn't hurt," he said when he saw me coming. "She makes it so it doesn't hurt." Who makes it not hurt?" "The crying lady. She lost her babies a long time ago. She's been looking for them ever since. She thought we were them, but we're too big. Now she's angry." Tommy's voice was getting weaker. The crystallization was spreading up his chest. "She's coming for you next, mister. She can smell the salt in your tears." Everyone has salt in their tears. Tommy, where's your little sister? Where's Sarah? He pointed toward the burial ground. She's keeping Sarah. Sarah looks like her babies did. She's going to keep Sarah forever. The boy's eyes closed, and the salt covered his face. Another perfect statue in the desert's collection. I ran toward the burial ground as the last light faded. My flashlight beam bounced wildly as I stumbled over the uneven ground. The temperature was dropping fast. Desert nights are always cold, but this was different. This was the cold of a grave. I found Sarah Hartman in the center of the burial ground, completely encased in salt crystal. She looked like a beautiful, terrible work of art. Her face was frozen in an expression of absolute terror, mouth open in a silent scream. But her eyes were still moving, still aware. She was alive inside that salt tomb. Around her were dozens of other salt statues, men, women, children from different time periods. I could see the remains of old-fashioned clothes, covered wagon-era boots, even what looked like Native American jewelry, all perfectly preserved in salt. They were all still alive, all still aware, trapped forever in crystal prisons. That's when I heard the crying. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. It was the most heartbroken sound I'd ever heard, a mother's wail for children she'd never hold again. But there was something else in it, something angry and hungry. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees in seconds. My breath came out in visible puffs. Ice crystals formed on my flashlight lens. Then I saw her. She stood at the edge of the burial ground, a woman in a tattered white dress. Her hair hung in wet strands around her face, and she was crying. But her tears weren't water, they were salt. They fell like snow around her feet, piling up in small drifts. She was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Her face was perfect, except for her eyes. They were completely white, like looking into empty holes. She moved toward me with a strange gliding motion, her feet never quite touching the ground. "My babies," she said, and her voice was like wind through broken glass. "Where are my babies?" I tried to back away, but my feet wouldn't move. The salt on the ground had turned sticky, like wet cement. It was holding me in place. "You're not their mother," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "These aren't your children." She tilted her head, studying me. "All children are my children. They all leave me. They all grow up and leave me alone." Her tears were falling faster now, and where they hit the ground, salt formations sprouted like plants. The formations grew toward me, reaching with crystal fingers. "I won't let them leave anymore," she said. "I'll keep them safe. I'll keep them with me forever." She raised her hand, and I felt something cold touch my chest. Looking down, I saw white crystals spreading across my shirt like frost. My skin underneath was going numb. I pulled out my emergency mirror, standard equipment for desert rescue. The polished surface caught the moonlight and threw it back at her. She shrieked and recoiled, her form becoming less solid. "Light," I whispered. "She doesn't like light." I ran, stumbling over salt formations and ancient bones. Behind me, her crying grew louder, more angry. The ground shook with each wail, and cracks appeared in the salt flat. Steam rose from the cracks, carrying the smell of old death. My truck was still a mile away. I had to make it before she recovered from the light. But the desert was fighting me. The salt formations were growing taller, forming walls and barriers. What had been a flat plain was becoming a maze. I could hear her following me. Her crying had turned into something else, a hunting call. She was no longer mourning. She was angry. "You cannot leave." Her voice echoed from all directions. "No one leaves the salt. No one leaves me." The formations around me grew higher, closing off my escape routes. I was trapped in a labyrinth of white crystal walls. Some of the formations contained dark shapes, more bodies, more victims from across the centuries. I saw a man in a cowboy hat, a woman in a pioneer dress, children in old-fashioned clothes, all perfectly preserved, all still aware. Their eyes tracked my movement as I passed. The crying lady appeared at the end of the corridor, blocking my path. This time she was closer, more solid. I could see details I'd missed before. Her dress was old-fashioned, maybe from the 1800s. There were dark stains on the fabric that might have been blood. "You smell like the ocean," she said, moving closer. "You smell like the place where my babies drowned." That's when I understood. She wasn't just any ghost. She was La Llorona, the weeping woman from Mexican folklore. But this wasn't Mexico. This was the middle of the Mojave Desert. "Your children didn't drown here," I said. "This is the desert. There's no water here. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Water, salt, it's all the same. They both preserve, they both keep things forever. I learned that after my babies died. I learned how to keep them safe. She reached out with one pale hand. Where her fingers touched the air, salt crystals formed and fell like snow. If she touched me, I'd end up like the others, aware but trapped, alive but dead. I pulled out my emergency flare and struck it. Red light exploded around us, and she screamed. The salt formations cracked and shattered. For a moment, I could see the real desert beyond the maze. I ran for the gap, but she was faster. She appeared in front of me, her white eyes filled with rage. "You cannot have them," she hissed. "They are mine now. They will never leave me again." This time, when she reached for me, I couldn't dodge. Her cold fingers touched my forehead, and I felt the salt begin to form. The cold spread through my skull like ice water. I could feel my thoughts slowing down, becoming crystalline. This was how she did it, not killing them, but preserving them, keeping them aware but helpless, like insects in amber. But I had one advantage she didn't expect. 21 years in the desert had taught me how to survive when everything goes wrong, and for years as a Navy medic had taught me how to function when everything hurts. I grabbed the silver cross from my dog tags, not because I thought it would hurt her, but because the metal was warm from my body heat. I pressed it against her hand where she touched me. She jerked back with a scream, not because of the cross, but because of the heat. She was a creature of cold and salt. Heat was her enemy. "You're not from here," I said, understanding flooding through me. "You're from somewhere cold, somewhere with snow and ice. You came here following the water underground." Her form flickered, becoming less solid. "The salt calls to salt," she whispered. "The tears call to tears. I follow the sorrow wherever it leads." I pulled out my emergency heat pack, the kind we used for hypothermia victims. I crushed it to activate the chemical reaction, and it began to glow with intense heat. She backed away, her crying becoming more frantic. "You cannot stop me. I have been here too long. I have taken too many. They are mine now." "Let them go," I said, advancing with the heat pack. "They're not your children. They never were." "All children are my children," she shrieked. "All mothers are me." The heat pack was making her form unstable. I could see through her now, see the real burial ground behind her illusion. The salt formations were melting, revealing the true bones of the dead, not her victims, the original Kemahuvi people who had been buried here generations ago. "You're disturbing their rest," I said. "You're disturbing the real dead." For the first time, she looked uncertain. Her white eyes turned toward the ancient bones, and I saw something like fear in her expression. "I only wanted my babies back," she whispered. "I only wanted to keep them safe. By trapping innocent people, by stealing children from their families." She was crying real tears now, not salt. They fell like drops of ice and shattered on the ground. "I can't find them," she sobbed. "I can't find my babies. They're lost in the water, and I can't find them." I felt a moment of pity. For her, she was a monster, but she was also a mother in eternal pain. But pity wouldn't save the people she'd trapped. "Let them go," I said again. "All of them. Let them rest." She looked at me with those horrible white eyes. "Will you help me find them? Will you help me find my babies?" I knew what she was asking. She wanted me to take their place, to become her eternal companion in this salt hell, to help her hunt for children who died 100 years ago. "No," I said, "but I'll help you rest. I'll help you find peace." I threw the heat pack at her feet. It exploded in a burst of chemical fire, and she screamed as her form dissolved. The salt formations around us began to crack and melt. The statues of her victims started to move. The salt was dissolving, freeing them from their crystal prisons, but they'd been trapped too long. As the salt fell away, they crumbled to dust, all except little Sarah Hartman, who was still fresh enough to survive. She fell to her knees, gasping and crying, real tears, not salt. "Mama," she whispered. "Where's my mama?" I picked her up and ran. Behind us, the burial ground was collapsing. The crying lady's final scream shattered every salt formation for miles around. The desert was reclaiming itself, burying the horror under tons of white crystal. I made it back to my truck with Sarah, just as the sun rose. The little girl was in shock, but she was alive. She was the only survivor of the Hartman family, and she'd never be the same. The official report listed the deaths as heat, stroke and dehydration. The unusual salt formations were blamed on a freak weather event. Sarah's testimony was dismissed as trauma-induced fantasy. A 5-year-old girl talking about crying ghost ladies doesn't carry much weight with investigators. But I knew the truth, and the truth changed me. I transferred to Oregon the next month. Couldn't handle the desert anymore. Couldn't stand the dry air, the heat, the endless horizon of sand and salt. I took a job in the wet, green forests of the Pacific Northwest, as far from the desert as I could get. But she left her mark on me. Even now, 30 years later, I can't cry normal tears. They taste like salt, not the normal salt of human tears, but the bitter salt of ancient seas. And sometimes, on very quiet nights, I can hear her crying in the distance. The Devil's Playground is still there, still claiming victims. Every few years, a family goes missing on those salt flats. Their cars are found empty, their belongings arranged in careful patterns. The authorities blame the heat, the isolation, the easy ways to get lost in the desert. But I know better. She's still out there, still searching for her lost babies, still preserving the living in salt tombs, keeping them forever young, forever trapped. Sarah Hartman grew up to become a geologist. She studies salt formations now, trying to understand what happened to her family. She calls me sometimes, asking questions I can't answer. We're the only ones who know the truth about the crying lady of the salt flats, and we're the only ones who know she's still hungry. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice that night. Maybe I should have stayed with her, helped her find peace. But then I remember little Sarah's face, remember the terror in the eyes of all those salt statues, and I know I did the only thing I could. I saved one life, but I didn't stop the monster. She's still out there in the Devil's Playground, weeping salt tears under the desert stars, still looking for children to keep forever, still growing her garden of crystal tombs, and she's still waiting for me to come back. My name is Robert Dustwind, and I've been running from the desert for 30 years. But you can't run from salt. It's in your blood, in your tears, in your bones. And someday, when I'm too old to run anymore, I think she'll find me. The crying never stops in the desert. It only gets quieter when you're not there to hear it. My name is Patrick Stormbringer, and I've been a forest ranger for 18 years. I know that sounds like a made-up name, but it's real. My Cherokee grandmother gave it to me when I was born, though I never put much stock in the old stories. She used to tell about thunder spirits and ancient guardians. I'm a practical man. Before I became a ranger, I studied weather patterns and storm systems. I know the difference between a regular lightning strike and something ... unusual. That's why the Forest Service called me in September of 1976, when the reports started coming in from the Cherokee National Forest. Patrick, we've got a problem. My supervisor Jim told me over the radio. 3 campsites destroyed by lightning strikes in the past week, all in the Joyce-Kilmer Wilderness area. I drove my truck down the winding mountain roads toward the ancient forest, thinking about what Jim had said. Lightning strikes weren't unusual during storm season, but 3 in 1 week. That was odd. The Joyce-Kilmer Forest was special, home to some of the oldest trees in the southeast. 400-year-old giants that had watched over these mountains since before the first European settlers arrived. The first thing I noticed when I got to the area was how quiet it was. No birds singing, no insects buzzing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I'd been in forests after bad storms before, and there was always some sound, branches settling, water dripping, something. But this place felt ... dead. I parked my truck near the first campsite and grabbed my equipment, clipboard, camera, electrical detector, standard stuff for investigating storm damage. The air smelled wrong too, not just the usual ozone smell you get after lightning. This was different, sharper, like burned copper. The destroyed RV sat in a small clearing surrounded by massive old trees. When I got closer, I stopped walking. In 18 years of storm damage assessment, I'd never seen anything like it. The RV was split perfectly in half, like someone had taken a giant knife and cut straight down the middle. But lightning doesn't work that way. Lightning follows the path of least resistance. It might blow out windows or start fires, but it doesn't cut things in half. I walked around the wreckage, taking pictures. The metal edges where the split occurred were smooth, almost polished. No char marks, no burn patterns, just a clean cut from roof to floor. My electrical detector started clicking rapidly as I got closer to the back half of the RV. That's when I found them. The family of 4 was still inside, mom, dad, and 2 kids. They looked like they were sleeping, except for the burns. Strange spiraling patterns covered their skin, starting at their feet and winding up their bodies like vines. The patterns reminded me of something, but I couldn't place what. I'd seen lightning victims before. The burns are usually messy, random. These were too precise, too organized. They looked almost ... intentional, like someone had drawn on their skin with electricity. I took more pictures and made notes, trying to stay professional, but my hands were shaking. The electrical detector kept clicking faster the longer I stayed near the bodies. When I finally moved away, it went quiet. I spent the rest of the day documenting everything I could. The position of the RV, the condition of the surrounding trees, the weird way the grass had been flattened in perfect circles around the campsite. By evening, I had a file full of evidence, but no explanations. As I drove back to town, storm clouds were building on the horizon. Big, dark thunderheads that seemed to follow the mountain ridges. I had grown up in these mountains, and I knew their weather patterns. But these clouds felt different. They moved too fast, changed direction too suddenly, and the lightning inside them flickered in colors I'd never seen before. Blue, green, sometimes a purple so deep it was almost black. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. The thunder spirits protect the old places. Patrick, they don't like strangers who don't show respect. I shook my head. I was a meteorologist, not a believer in old stories. There had to be a scientific explanation for what I'd seen. There always was. But as I drove through the night, lightning flashing in my rearview mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from those ancient trees. The next morning brought more bad news. Jim called before I'd even finished my coffee. Another one. Patrick, same area. You need to get out there. I grabbed my gear and drove back to the Joyce Kilmer forest. The storm from the night before had passed, but the air still felt charged. My radio crackled with static every few miles, and my truck's electrical system kept surging and dimming. The second campsite was 2 miles deeper into the forest, near an old Cherokee trail that most tourists never found. I had to hike in, carrying my equipment through thick underbrush and around fallen logs the size of subway cars. When I reached the clearing, I wished I hadn't. 2 tents sat side by side, both perfectly intact, no damage at all. But the smell hit me first, that same burned copper scent, but stronger, sweet and metallic and wrong. I unzipped the first tent and immediately stepped back. The 2 hikers inside were fused together, not burned, not melted, fused, like they'd been made of clay and pressed together by invisible hands. Their faces were peaceful, almost smiling, but their bodies had merged at the shoulders, arms, and legs, creating a single twisted form that made my stomach turn. The electrical detector in my pack started clicking before I even turned it on. I forced myself to take pictures, documenting everything. The second tent held the same scene. 2 more hikers fused together, their backpacks and supplies undisturbed around them. No signs of struggle, no evidence of external force. But it was the trees that really got to me. Every tree within feet of the campsite was scarred, not from fire or physical damage, but from electrical burns that spiraled up their trunks in the same pattern I'd seen on the RV family. The scars were old, some looked like they'd been there for decades, maybe centuries. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. I was taking pictures of the tree scars when my radio crackled to life. Galfcudio and Faye. The voice was speaking Cherokee. My grandmother had taught me enough to recognize the language, though I couldn't understand most of it. But the voice wasn't coming from any ranger station I knew. The signal was too clear. To close, NVHI, Onihuntukwaloski. I spun around, looking for the source. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, from the trees themselves. "Hello," I called out. "Who's there?" Silence. Then a sound I'd never heard before, a low rumble that seemed to come from underground. Not thunder, exactly. More like the earth itself was growling. I packed up my equipment and started hiking back to my truck. But the Cherokee words kept echoing in my head. I had a feeling I knew what they meant, even though I couldn't translate them. Something is coming. That night, I drove to the Cherokee reservation and found my grandmother's old friend, Mary Walkingstick. She was in her 80s, one of the few people left who remembered the old stories. "Mary," I said, showing her the pictures, "I need to know what this means." She looked at the spiral patterns on the victims and the tree scars. Her face went pale. "Where did you find these?" "Joyce Kilmer Forest, near the old ceremonial grounds." Mary set the pictures down and looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than her 80 years. "You need to stay away from there, Patrick. That place is protected." "Protected by what?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Anamiki, the thunder being. It guards the sacred places where our ancestors spoke with the spirits. When outsiders come without permission, without respect." She pointed to the pictures. "This is what happens. Mary, I need facts, not stories. These are facts. Boy, your grandmother knew. She tried to teach you, but you wouldn't listen." Mary stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the mountains. "The thunder being doesn't just kill, it transforms. It makes examples. Those burn marks, they're not random. They're warnings. Warnings about what? Stay away from the old places, or become part of them." I left Mary's house with more questions than answers. But as I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about the Cherokee words I'd heard on the radio. And I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there in the forest wasn't finished with me yet. I should have listened to Mary. I should have recommended that the Forest Service close the Joyce Kilmer area until we could figure out what was happening, but I was stubborn, and I was scared of looking foolish. So when Jim called about the third incident, I grabbed my gear and headed back into the forest. This time, I wasn't going in alone. I'd convinced 2 other rangers, Mike and Sarah, to come with me. "Safety in numbers," I told them. "Just a routine investigation." The third campsite was the deepest yet, almost at the heart of the old growth forest. We had to hike for 3 hours through terrain that seemed to fight us every step of the way. Branches caught our clothes, roots tripped us, and the air grew thicker with each mile. "This place gives me the sea." "Reaps," Sarah said, as we climbed over a fallen tree that could have been here since before Columbus. "Just stay alert," I told her, "and keep your radios on." But our radios had been dead since we entered the forest. No static, no emergency broadcasts, just silence. We found the hikers in a small clearing surrounded by the biggest trees I'd ever seen. 5 of them, all standing upright in a perfect circle, facing inward. At first, I thought they were alive. They hadn't fallen over, hadn't collapsed. They just stood there like they were waiting for something. Then I got closer. Their eyes were gone. Not burned out, not damaged, just gone. Empty sockets that seemed to go deeper than they should. But the strangest part was their skin. It had a blue-gray tint, like old copper, and it seemed to shimmer when the light hit it just right. Mike reached out to touch one of them. "Don't," I said, but it was too late. The moment his finger made contact, the hiker's body exploded into sparks. Not fire, not smoke, pure electrical energy that danced in the air for a few seconds before fading away. Where the hiker had been standing, only a small pile of ash remained. "Jesus Christ," Mike whispered. Sarah was backing away, but I made myself stay put. I had to document this. I had to understand what was happening. The other 4 hikers were still standing, still waiting. I took out my camera and started taking pictures. With each flash, the bodies seemed to flicker like they were made of electricity themselves. That's when I noticed the trees. The electrical scars I'd seen at the other campsites were here too. But these were different, deeper, older. Some of the patterns were so complex they looked like ancient writing. And they were glowing. Not bright, just a faint blue-green light. That pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. "Patrick," Sarah called from the edge of the clearing. "We need to leave. Now." I looked up from my camera to see what she was pointing at. The remaining hikers were moving. Not walking, not falling, rotating. Slowly turning to face us with their empty eye sockets. "Run," I said. We crashed through the underbrush, not caring about the noise or the branches that whipped at our faces. Behind us, I could hear something that sounded like singing, if electricity could sing. High-pitched metallic voices that seemed to come from the trees themselves. We didn't stop running until we reached the trucks. Only then did I realize that my camera was smoking. The digital display was completely fried, showing nothing but scrambled lines and numbers. "What the hell was that?" Mike asked, trying to catch his breath. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I was starting to understand what Mary had tried to tell me. This wasn't just about lightning strikes or electrical anomalies. This was about something much older and much more dangerous. Something that had been protecting these mountains for centuries. That night, I spread out maps of the Cherokee National Forest on my kitchen table. I marked the locations of all 3 incidents, then added the sites of Cherokee ceremonial grounds that I'd found in old survey records. They matched, every single one. The Thunder Being wasn't randomly attacking campers. It was defending specific places, sacred places, sites where the Cherokee had performed ceremonies for generations before they were forced to leave these mountains. I was starting to connect the dots when the lights went out, not just in my house, in the entire valley. Through my window, I could see the forest outlined against the starry sky, dark and silent and waiting. Then the thunder started. But this wasn't normal thunder. It was rhythmic, like drums, like a heartbeat, and it was getting closer. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The air was completely still, but I could feel electricity building around me. The hair on my arms stood up. My metal flashlight grew warm in my hand. The Cherokee words I'd heard on the radio came back to me. Galv Quadadu NVI, something is coming NVI, Any Huntiqualoski, the Thunderwalkers. I was finally beginning to understand what those words meant, and I was terrified. I went back to see Mary Walkingstick the next morning. This time, I brought everything, maps, photos, notes, and a growing certainty that I was dealing with something far beyond normal forest ranger training. It's real, isn't it? I asked her. The Thunder Being. Mary nodded slowly. His name is Animicky. He's been protecting the sacred places since before the white soldiers came, before the Trail of Tears, before our people were forced to leave these mountains. But why now? Why is he killing people now? Because more people are coming, more campers, more hikers, more people who don't understand what they're walking into. The sacred sites are being trampled, disrespected. Animicky is trying to protect what's left. I showed her the maps with the marked locations. These are all ceremonial grounds. Yes, places where our ancestors communed with the thunder spirits, where they asked for protection, for wisdom, for strength. Mary traced the patterns with her finger. But there's one more site, the most important one. She pointed to a spot deep in the forest that I hadn't marked. The Heart Grove. That's where Animicky lives, where he was born from the first thunderstorm to ever touch these mountains. If someone went there, they wouldn't come back, not as themselves. I knew I had to go, not just because it was my job, but because I was starting to understand something else. The Cherokee words I'd been hearing, the way the electrical detector responded to me, the fact that I was one of the few people to encounter these sites and survive. It wasn't coincidence. It was because I was Cherokee too, part of me, anyway. Mary, my grandmother, used to tell me stories about thunder spirits, but she also said I had a choice. What did she mean? Mary studied my face for a long moment. She meant you could choose to be a bridge between the old ways and the new, between Animicky and the people who don't understand him. But first, I have to meet him. Yes, but Patrick, ... If you go to the Heart Grove, you need to go as Cherokee, not as a forest ranger, not as a scientist, as one of the people. That afternoon, I drove to the deepest part of the Joyce Kilmer Forest. I left my truck at the end of a logging road and hiked in carrying only basic supplies, water, a knife, and a small medicine bag my grandmother had given me when I was 12. I'd never worn it, never really believed in it, but now it felt warm against my chest. The Heart Grove was 5 miles from the nearest trail, in a part of the forest that tourists never saw. Ancient trees grew so thick that sunlight barely reached the ground. The air was heavy with the smell of rich earth and something else, ozone, like the moment before a storm breaks. I found the grove just as the sun was setting. 20 massive trees arranged in a perfect circle, their trunks so wide that people couldn't reach around them. In the center was a clearing covered with soft moss that glowed faintly in the twilight. This was it, the heart of the forest, the place where Animicky lived. I walked to the center of the circle and sat down on the moss. Following an instinct I didn't fully understand, I began to speak in Cherokee. The words came slowly at first, phrases my grandmother had taught me, half-remembered songs from childhood. Asta Galvkodu, I said. Hello, Thunder Being. The response was immediate. The trees around me began to glow with that same blue-green light I'd seen at the other sites. The electrical patterns in their bark pulsed faster, brighter, and the air itself seemed to thicken, like breathing through water. Then I heard it, a sound like thunder, but deeper, like the earth itself. Was speaking Gado Halito. A voice said, *, who are you? I could see him now, 12 feet tall, shaped like a bear but made of living electricity. His fur was blue-white lightning that flickered and danced. His eyes were tiny suns that made my own eyes water to look at directly. Gilv Quadu, Patrick Stormbringer, I replied. I am Patrick Stormbringer. The great head tilted, studying me. Asterisk, on a Cherokee, YV, on a Cherokee, asterisk. Yes, Cherokee. Anamiki moved closer, each step sending sparks dancing across the moss. I could feel the electricity building in the air around me, making my skin tingle and my hair stand on end. Asterisk, Hugh Ditsadovsi, why do you come here? I thought carefully, before answering. This was the moment Mary had prepared me for, the choice my grandmother had spoken of. You or Harley, I said. Peace, the thunder being stopped moving. For a long moment, the only sound was the soft crackling of electricity in the air. Then Anamiki spoke again, this time in English. His voice was like distant thunder, deep and resonant. Your people have forgotten the old ways. They come to the sacred places without respect, without understanding. They bring their noise and their trash and their disregard. I know, I said. I've seen what you've done to them. I protect what is sacred, as my ancestors protected it before me, as I will protect it until the last tree falls. But there has to be another way, a way that doesn't involve killing. Anamiki leaned down until his great head was level with mine. Up close, I could see that his electrical fur was actually made of thousands of tiny lightning bolts, constantly moving and reshaping themselves. You would be a bridge, he asked, if you'll let me. The thunder being studied me for what felt like hours. Then he reached out with one massive paw and touched my chest, right over my heart. The pain was incredible, like being struck by lightning, from the inside out. Every nerve in my body fired at once, and I screamed until my voice gave out. When it was over, I was lying on the moss, gasping for breath. Anamiki stood over me, his electric form shimmering in the darkness. You are marked now, he said, bound to the sacred places. You will protect them as I do, but in your own way. I looked down at my chest. Through my torn shirt, I could see a spiral burn mark that glowed faintly blue. It looked exactly like the patterns I'd seen on the trees and the victims. What does this mean? It means you are my voice among your people. You will turn them away from the sacred places, guide them to where they may camp safely. And when the storms come, you will know. As if to prove his point, I suddenly felt a tingling in the mark on my chest. Storm clouds were building on the horizon, and I could sense exactly where they would strike, how strong they would be. And if I fail, Anamiki began to fade, becoming translucent. Then I will do what I have always done. I will protect the sacred places, Wado. I said, thank you. The thunder being smiled, a expression that was both terrifying and beautiful. Asterisk Duyuktiv, Patrick Stormbringer. Until we meet again. Asterisk, and then he was gone, leaving me alone in the grove with the sound of approaching thunder and a new understanding of my place in the world. That was 47 years ago. I'm retired now, but I still live in the same house, in the shadow of the Cherokee National Forest, and I still keep my promise to Anamiki. Over the years, I've guided hundreds of campers away from the sacred sites. Most of them never knew why I suggested different locations for their campsites. I told them about better views, easier access to water, safer conditions. They trusted me because I was the ranger who knew the forest better than anyone else. I became known for my uncanny ability to predict storms. Weather services would call me when their instruments showed conflicting data. I could tell them exactly when and where lightning would strike, sometimes hours before their satellites detected the conditions. The mark on my chest never faded. If anything, it grew brighter over the years. Before every storm, it would glow and tingle, giving me advance warning. I learned to read its signals like other people read barometers. The official reports from those 3 incidents in 1976 listed the deaths as lightning strikes, natural disasters, acts of God. I never corrected them. Some truths are too dangerous to put in official records, but I made sure the sacred sites were protected. I worked with the Forest Service to establish sensitive ecological areas that required special permits to access. I created interpretive programs about Cherokee history and the importance of respecting sacred places. Slowly, quietly, I built a buffer between the ancient sites and the modern world. Anamiki kept his word too. There were no more electrical deaths in the Cherokee National Forest, not as long as I did my job. I've trained my replacement, a young ranger named Jennifer Crowfeather. She's Cherokee too, though she doesn't know about the thunder being yet. That conversation will come when she's ready, when the forest calls to her the way it called to me. Last night, I felt the familiar tingle in my chest. A storm is coming, bigger than any I've sensed before. I can feel Anamiki stirring in the heart grove, electricity building in the ancient trees. There's been talk of opening more of the forested development. Logging companies want access to the old growth areas. Tourism boards want to build hiking trails through the sacred sites. They see dollar signs where they should see history. I've done what I can through official channels, but I'm old now. My influence is waning. The new generation of forest managers doesn't listen to stories about sacred places and traditional knowledge, so I've made a decision. Tomorrow, I'm going back to the Heart Grove. I'm going to tell Anamiki that I've done my best, but that I can't protect the sacred places forever. I'm going to ask him to wait just a little longer, to give Jennifer time to learn her role. But I'm also going to warn him, because I've seen the development plans. I've heard the conversations, and I know that some battles can't be won with compromise and careful guidance. The mark on my chest is glowing brighter tonight than it has in years. Through my window, I can see storm clouds building over the mountains, backlit by electricity that flickers in colors that don't exist in nature. Anamiki is waiting for me in the Heart Grove. We have things to discuss. The thunder is walking again.